I was going to carry on, but I think I'll just start. What colour do you reckon? We'll go with green. Welcome to another video, and today we're comparing Citrix on-premise versus cloud. So if we start with a typical Citrix deployment, so for Citrix on-prem, very often we'll have a NetScaler, and we'll draw this as an N configuration with that N+1. So we typically have a NetScaler, and that runs our gateway service. And what we'll then have is our storefronts. And this delivers effectively a number of different components, because this is actually a collapsed, you can have a collapsed architecture. As you scale out, you can split these out, but this has storefronts and effectively this is the broker service that basically connects the sessions to the right location. And then we have, ordinarily, we'd have our licensing server. Why use capitals when you can use lowercase?
Why not?
So that basically handles all your licensing for all of your boxes. And then you'd have typically all of your infrastructure that would be your Citrix boxes where your users will connect to. So that is a fairly typical deployment. Oh, we missed something really important actually, SQL. So you'll also have a SQL database, which is connected to your storefronts. So this can end up quite a complex deployment. You know, you can end up with a lot of infrastructure to manage. And imagine obviously if this is HA, you're going to need double everything. And then you also need to think about how you're going to make this HA from an architecture perspective. So before you know it, you end up with NetScalers, which are an expensive license option. You end up with SQL that you have to manage and maintain, backup, protect, and replicate. You've got your storefront server, and you've got your licensing servers. And all of that stuff together can get very expensive very, very quick. But you can typically deliver a 99.999% availability SLA on a setup. Obviously, not single node, but having two of everything, you can deliver that kind of SLA. But recently, I say recently, within the last 2 to 3 years, Citrix browsed something called Citrix Cloud. And what that does is it allows us to do away with some of these components and really simplify the architecture. So what we end up with is drawing a dog.
That's a dog he's drawing. He's drawing a dog.
We end up with Citrix Cloud. And we have effectively Citrix Cloud, so Citrix over in Azure, where they'll deploy, and effectively inside there you get a bunch of managed services, one of which is the NetScaler service, and also the storefront. So you can basically log into your cloud portal and you effectively get the same management interface like you would for an on-prem deployment. And you can manage all of your session hosts in there and do everything you want to do. Now, what that means is you're able to do away with things like the storefront servers. You're able to do away with things like a licensing server. So what you end up with is effectively, again, this is for a single deployment just for simplicity, but you end up with your cloud connector, which effectively tunnels back to this infrastructure over in Azure. And then you end up with normally you would have a FAS server for some deployments. And what this does is it allows federated authentication. So when you sign into your user out here, comes in, logs into the web portal, connected to Citrix Cloud, they sign into the desktop and don't have to sign in twice. So that makes life a lot easier. So we end up with a FAS, and then we end up with, you can collapse these, but you'll end up with a CA, because you need a CA for some of the FAS services, but you could sit on the same box or a separate if you wanted to. And then all we've got is our Citrix machines. So we've managed to simplify the infrastructure significantly. So effectively, you now don't need a SQL server. You don't need to have any of the complex components because they're effectively all part of the Citrix Azure. I mean, effectively, they've got a NetScaler or a few of them set up here. They've got SQL databases up here, and they're delivering all of that to you as a service and doing all of that sort of like heavy lifting that if it was in your infrastructure, you would have to do. So that makes life nice and easy. And we really like it. But the one caveat of Citrix Cloud is the SLAs. From the top of my mind, I think it's a 99.9 It's either 99.9% or 99.95%. We'll put 99.9 for now. And that's because their infrastructure in that scenario just isn't super robust. So there is a step you can take, which a bit like when you've got on-prem Citrix deployed and you kind of have that session reliability and host cache, you can do a very similar thing now in Citrix Cloud where the workspace client on this person's device will actually cache a copy, like a token, for access to the environment, which will allow them in if some of the Citrix infrastructure is down. But if you wanted to go another step up to really improve that, you can actually add your own NetScaler, but you're sort of defeating the point of having Citrix Cloud at that point. And you can actually then, because really in their environment, my experience is that it's that thing that falls over, not the rest of it. So if you move the NetScaler component out into your environment here, you can probably get that up to about 99.95 maybe, something like that. So that's worth considering because, yeah, like I say, when we see problems, we see them with the hosted NetScaler service. So that, in a nutshell, is really the comparison between the two types of Citrix deployments, so Citrix Cloud versus Citrix On-premise. From a licensing perspective, it is cheaper at scale to do Citrix Cloud, but not by a lot. I think they'll probably make the price very similar soon. You are likely to get a lot more feature releases in Citrix Cloud going forwards, but they'll still continue to support the on-prem versions for a long, long time, I'm sure. But yeah, it's really for us, I'll be honest, it really comes down to this. What level of availability does the customer want to achieve? If they're satisfied by that from a desktop access perspective, then yeah, we can deploy Citrix Cloud for them. If you've got any questions about this deployment or other technical questions, drop them in the comments and we'll get back to you. And if you didn't like this video, be sure to drop a like 3 times. I didn't prep for that at all, because I know what I'm talking about, I think.